The legalization of marijuana, a brief history. On the first day of 2014, Colorado became the first state to permit marijuana dispensaries to sell pot for recreational use. Across the state, celebratory stoners welcomed the new year by lining up at licensed retailers to buy bags of heavily taxed artisanal marijuana with varietal names like Pineapple Express and Alaskan Thunderbolt. Since the first statewide medical marijuana laws went into effect in California in 1996, the number of Americans with legal access to what for many is a pleasurable drug has been steadily growing. 20 states and the District of Columbia now permit the sale of various forms of marijuana for medical purposes. In the past several months, the governor of New York, a state known since 1963 for its punitive drug law, announced that he too would pursue accommodation for medical marijuana, and recreational marijuana is expected to be offered for sale in Washington state later this year. Recently, the District of Columbia decriminalized the possession of an ounce or less of marijuana, treating it as a civil offense from now on. In the least restrictive jurisdiction, purchasing medical marijuana requires a perfunctory visit to a pot doc, licensed physicians who specialize in prescribing marijuana, usually located through online and newspaper advertisement, for the diagnosis of any of dozens of conditions, including chronic pain, gastrointestinal distress, and depression, which the drug is believed to help alleviate. Medical marijuana remains solidly in the realm of alternative medicine, and few clinical studies have been conducted to confirm specific claims. After paying a consultation fee on the order of $100, new medical marijuana patients are issued a card that allows them to shop at the dispensary or order from delivery service that offer cultivars of the two major strains on the plant, Cannabis indica and Cannabis sativa, as well as potions, baked goods, and candies made from its extracts. With the current state level push toward legalization, Butter seems to have found a way around the 20th century quest for prohibition, a prohibition that has become increasingly difficult to explain or justify. Consider that marijuana remains on the federal government's list of Schedule I drugs, defined as the most dangerous of the controlled substances and is labeled as posing a severe risk of addiction. Although many physicians don't believe that to be true. Unlike alcohol, excessive pot smoking has not been unambiguously implicated in violent behavior or poor health. As a Schedule I drug under federal law, marijuana is considered to have no medical use, although there are thousands of patients' testimonials to the contrary. And perhaps the biggest contradiction of all is that since the century long drive for prohibition was initiated, marijuana has become extremely popular. Every year, hundreds of thousands of unlucky citizens face criminal sanctions for getting caught with a drug that one-third of all Americans, including college students, professional athletes, legions of entertainers, and the past three US presidents, have experimented with at least once. In popular culture, the drug has become accepted as harmless fun. In 2014, a talk show host can joke with a former congressman about being pot smoker on cable TV. As Americans consider further legalizing marijuana, it is worth reviewing how the use of this plant became illegal in the first place and why prohibition persists in much of the country, more than a half century after its use became common. Interestingly, while marijuana use has been an urgent topic of conversation for over a century in this country, the voices of doctors and scientists have been largely quiet. Instead, the debate has been shaped by media portrayals of drug use and reinforced by politicians and advocacy groups that supported them. From commonplace to illegal. Today, in states with the most liberal marijuana laws, citizens' access to the drug now resembles that of the 19th and early 20th centuries, before the first attempts at federal regulation. Cannabis, like opiates and cocaine, was freely available at drug stores in liquid form and as a refined product, hashish. Cannabis was also a common ingredient in turn of the century patent medicines, over the counter concoctions brewed with the proprietary formulas. Then, as now it was difficult to clearly distinguish between medicinal and recreational use of a product whose purpose is to make you feel good. The hashish candy advertised in a 1862 issue of Vanity Fair as a treatment for nervousness and melancholy, for example, was also a pleasurable and harmless stimulant. Under its influence, all classes seemed to gather new inspiration and energy. The advertisement explained. While there were fads for cannabis across the 19th century, strictly recreational use was not widely known or accepted. During these periods, American druggists were familiar with hashish and other preparation of cannabis, and the marijuana plant had been widely cultivated for the end fiber used in rope and chips riggings. But the practice of smoking marijuana leaf in cigarettes or pipes was largely unknown in the United States until it was introduced by Mexican immigrants during the first few decades of the 20th century. That introduction, in turn, generated a reaction in the United States, tinged perhaps with anti Mexican xenophobia. The first attempt at federal regulation of marijuana came in 1906 with the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act. The act included cannabis among the various substances patent medicine companies were required to list on their labels in order that worried customers could avoid it. Then, between 1914 and 1925, 26 states passed laws prohibiting the plant. The anti-marijuana laws were uncontroversial and passed, for the most part, with an absence of public outrage or even legislative debate. Flushed with success in pushing through alcohol prohibition, temperance campaigners in the 1920s began turning attention toward opiates and cocaine, which had become prohibited under increasingly strict Supreme Court interpretation of the 1914 Harrison Narcotics Act. Former Spanish American war hero Richmond P. Hobson, who had been the Anti-Saloon League's best paid public speaker, began warning of a dire threat posed by narcotics to national survival and the national character. Newspaper and magazine published melodramatic and sensational stories about the threat of narcotics addiction and the horrible plight of those caught in narcotics grip. Following a Hollywood drug scandal in 1921, The newspaper, published by William Randolph Hearst, launched what became an annual crusade against narcotics with a hyperbolic and tear-jerking account by Star Reporter. Sub-sister Winifred Black, who also wrote under the name Anya Laurie. Hearst's efforts time to coordinate with Hobson's annual Narcotic Education Week exploited a new angle during the second half of the decade, depicting marijuana as the largely unknown drug of murder, torture, and hideous cruelty, such as this example from 1927. The fact that marijuana smoking was a habit of immigrants and the lower class clearly played a role in its prohibition, though there is a little indication that Hearst was more racist than might be expected of a man of his time and station. The association of murder, torture, and mindless violence with marijuana was not borne out by evidence or actual events but blossomed thanks to the vivid imagination of the journalist charged with sensationalizing the entire story of drug use and addiction. Until a few decades prior, the public was acquainted with opiates from widespread medicinal use and with cocaine from its presence in drugstore potions including Coca-Cola. Journalists, politicians, police, and middle-class readers had no similar familiarity with marijuana, allowing it to become the vessel for their worst fears. Addicting, personality destroyed, violence causing for the journalists in the 1920s, charged with composing annual anti-narcotics. Jeremites for Hearst's famously sensational newspaper, a new murder drug must have seemed a gift. Until this moment, I didn't know why the marijuana is illegal, but right now I know it. I think it's a controversial topic because the answer isn't so simply to say because it's wrong or because that damage. I think in this society there are a lot of things that damages but not for that are illegal. So I think I'm going to investigate much more about this topic because this caused me interesting. I think everything in this world can be addictive and that only depends of us and our power to influence in our decision in our lives. In my point of view, the marijuana only is illegal because that can increase his price and also that offer people a message of rebellion and empowered. For that the marijuana be legal only makes most attractive to the people.